Close your eyes for a moment and imagine stepping back in time. The year is 1950. The streets of New York City are alive with the hum of classic cars, the chatter of well-dressed pedestrians, and the distant tunes of jazz drifting from a smoky club in Harlem. Skyscrapers stretch toward the heavens, neon lights flicker in Times Square, and the scent of fresh pretzels fills the air. This was a city of dreams, of elegance, of boundless opportunity. But what was life really like in New York back then? Let's take a journey to a time when the Big Apple was at the heart of American culture, innovation, and nostalgia. New York City in the 1950s was a city on the rise. But to understand its transformation, we need to go back to the years just before the decade began. The 1940s had been defined by World War II, a time of sacrifice and uncertainty. As young men went off to war, the city's factories worked around the clock, producing weapons, ships, and supplies. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, and immigrants continued to arrive seeking a better life. By the time the war ended in 1945, New York stood at a crossroads ready to leave hardship behind and step into a new era of prosperity. The post-war years brought an economic boom that reshaped the city. Returning soldiers found jobs in booming industries, and families settled into a comfortable middle-class lifestyle. New York became the financial capital of the world, with Wall Street flourishing and Madison Avenue leading the revolution in advertising. Skyscrapers continued to rise, filling the skyline with symbols of American ambition. One of the most important additions was the United Nations headquarters, completed in 1952. Its sleek, modern design stood as a beacon of international diplomacy, solidifying New York's role as a global leader. At street level, the city was alive with energy. Department stores like Macy's and Saks Fifth Avenue were packed with shoppers embracing the newfound culture of consumerism. Diner counters buzzed with conversation over cups of coffee and slices of pie, while cab drivers weaved through traffic, honking impatiently. Times Square, with its glowing neon signs and bustling theaters, was the entertainment capital of the country. Everywhere, there was a sense that New York was the place to be an engine of progress, innovation, and opportunity. But change wasn't always smooth. Urban planner Robert Moses led ambitious infrastructure projects, building new highways, bridges, and public housing developments. While these projects modernized the city, they also displaced thousands of residents, as entire neighborhoods were demolished in the name of progress. The divide between rich and poor became more visible, as some enjoyed the benefits of the economic boom, while others struggled to keep up with the cost of living. Still, despite its challenges, 1950s New York was a city filled with hope. It was a time of reinvention, where the American dream felt more real than ever. The war was over, the future was bright, and New York was ready to take on the world. While the city's skyline reached new heights and its economy flourished, something even more profound was happening in the cafes, clubs, and theaters of New York. The 1950s marked a cultural explosion, a golden era that would shape the city's identity for decades to come. Music, art, theater, and literature weren't just thriving, they were transforming the way people saw the world. At the heart of this transformation was jazz. The smoky clubs of Harlem and Greenwich Village became the epicenter of a musical revolution, where legends like Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and Thelonious Monk pushed the boundaries of sound. Bebop, with its fast, intricate rhythms, dominated the scene, turning jazz into a cerebral and deeply expressive art form. Musicians gathered in tiny, dimly lit venues like the Village Vanguard and the Blue Note, improvising late into the night as eager audiences soaked in every note. The music wasn't just entertainment, it was a movement, a statement of individuality, creativity, and freedom. Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, Broadway was redefining American theater. This was a golden age for musicals, with productions like West Side Story, The Music Man, and The King and I captivating audiences. Theaters along 42nd Street and Times Square dazzled with marquee lights, drawing people from all walks of life to witness the magic of the stage. Broadway wasn't just producing entertainment, it was shaping culture, creating timeless stories that would become American classics. But the city's creative energy wasn't limited to the stage or the music halls. In the art world, New York was experiencing a radical shift. Abstract expressionism was taking over, led by pioneers like Jackson Pollock, Mark Rothko, and Willem de Kooning. Their bold, chaotic canvases were unlike anything seen before, splashing emotion and movement onto the world stage. The walls of galleries in Midtown and Soho displayed these daring works, cementing New York's reputation as the new global capital of art, surpassing even Paris. Literature, too, was undergoing a revolution. The Beat Generation, a group of young, rebellious writers and poets, emerged in the cafes and bookstores of Greenwich Village. Figures like Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, and William S. Burroughs rejected the materialism and conformity of post-war America, instead embracing spontaneity, raw emotion, and a countercultural spirit. Their works, like On the Road and Howl, became the voice of a restless generation searching for meaning beyond the white picket fence American dream. This creative energy extended beyond traditional art forms. In diners and coffee shops, intellectuals debated philosophy and politics, discussing existentialism, socialism, and civil rights. The city itself became a canvas for expression, with fashion, language, and even everyday interactions reflecting the dynamic cultural shift. Beatniks in black turtlenecks, sharp-dressed ad executives on Madison Avenue, working-class families enjoying a night out in Coney Island each. One was part of the larger story of 1950s New York. Everywhere you turned, something was happening in new sound, a new story, a new way of seeing the world. The city wasn't just experiencing a cultural boom, it was setting the stage for the future of art, music, and literature. Beyond the glitz of Broadway, the allure of jazz clubs, and the towering skyscrapers, daily life in 1950s New York was a unique experience zone filled with contrasts. For many, the city was a land of opportunity, a place where the American dream felt within reach. But life in the Big Apple wasn't the same for everyone. While some enjoyed prosperity in the post-war boom, others struggled to keep up in a city that was constantly changing. In middle-class neighborhoods like Queens and Brooklyn, family life revolved around community ties and simple pleasures. Mothers stayed home to take care of the house, while fathers commuted to work in Manhattan, dressed in sharp suits with neatly folded newspapers tucked under their arms. Kids played stickball in the streets, hopped on bikes to the local soda fountain, or gathered around bulky black and white television sets to watch I Love Lucy or The Ed Sullivan Show. The pace of life was predictable and secure, with weekends spent at Coney Island, attending church services, or shopping at bustling department stores like Macy's. But not everyone lived the idyllic suburban life. In the crowded tenement buildings of the Lower East Side, life was much tougher. Immigrant families, many of them Jewish, Italian, Irish, or Puerto Rican, worked long hours in garment factories, restaurants, or street markets to make ends meet. The city's rapid expansion often came at the expense of these communities. Robert Moses's urban renewal projects displaced thousands, as neighborhoods were demolished to make way for highways and new housing developments. For many working-class New Yorkers, survival in the city meant adapting to relentless change. Public spaces played a huge role in everyday life. Central Park was an oasis where families strolled on Sundays and children played on swings, while the Staten Island Ferry provided one of the cheapest ways to enjoy breathtaking views of the city skyline. The subway, already an integral part of New York life, was packed with commuters, students, and entertainers playing for spare change. Taxis zipped through the streets, their drivers exchanging thick New York accents with hurried passengers. The city never stopped moving, and neither did its people. Fashion was another reflection of the era. Men wore gray flannel suits, fedoras, and polished shoes, inspired by the clean-cut style of Hollywood icons like Cary Grant. Women embraced the elegance of the time, wearing full skirts, pearls, and gloves, with hairstyles kept perfectly in place. Teenage culture was beginning to take shape, as young people turned to rock and roll, leather jackets, and rebellion, influenced by stars like James Dean and Elvis Presley. Despite its challenges, there was something undeniably special about life in New York during this time. The city felt full of promise, brimming with opportunity and excitement. Whether you were sipping a 5-cent cup of coffee at an all-night diner, catching a Dodgers game at Ebbets Field, or simply walking through Times Square under the glow of neon lights, you were part of something bigger. New York in the 1950s was a city where anything felt possible place of tradition and transformation, of struggle and success, of dreams and reality, all woven together in the heartbeat of the greatest city in the world. Did you remember all these names? Let's talk now about how people moved around the big city in those years. Transportation and infrastructure were at the core of daily life, shaping not just how people got around, but also how the city itself grew and evolved. From the screeching subway trains beneath the streets to the sleek automobiles cruising down Fifth Avenue, getting around in the Big Apple was an experience in itself. The subway was already the lifeblood of New York. Millions of people relied on its extensive network to get to work, school, and entertainment hotspots. For just a dime, you could travel from the Bronx to Brooklyn, rubbing shoulders with businessmen, students, artists, and blue-collar workers all packed into the same metal cars. The trains were noisy, graffiti-free, and mostly reliable, but they could also be hot and crowded during rush hour. Station attendants in crisp uniforms kept the lines moving, while newsboys shouted headlines above the clatter of footsteps and turnstiles. Above ground, yellow checker cabs zipped through the city streets, their drivers navigating the chaos with expert precision. A ride across town could be an adventure, with honking horns, quick stops, and an endless sea of pedestrians weaving through traffic. Meanwhile, the bus system expanded, offering another affordable way to travel across the 5 boroughs. Double-decker buses, a relic of the past, still rumbled through certain routes, giving riders a unique view of the bustling streets below. But perhaps the most ambitious changes to the city's infrastructure came from Robert Moses, the mastermind behind New York's urban transformation. He envisioned a city built for the future one, with grand highways, towering bridges, and modern public spaces. Under his leadership, massive projects like the Cross Bronx Expressway and the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway took shape, forever altering the landscape of working-class neighborhoods. These highways allowed cars to move through the city faster, but they also came at a cost. Entire communities were displaced, and historic blocks were demolished in the name of progress. Bridges and tunnels also played a key role in New York's expansion. The Verrazano-Narrows Bridge was still a decade away, but the George Washington Bridge and the Queens Midtown Tunnel were already vital arteries, connecting the city to the surrounding areas. The Staten Island Ferry remained a classic mode of transportation, offering breathtaking views of the Statue of Liberty and the ever-growing skyline for just a nickel. Meanwhile, air travel was entering a new era. Idlewild Airport, later renamed John F. Kennedy International Airport, was becoming a major hub connecting New York to the rest of the world. Sleek Pan Am and TWA planes took off, carrying businessmen and celebrities to distant destinations, reinforcing New York's status as an international metropolis. With each passing year, the city became more connected, more modern, and more ambitious. The 1950s were a time when New York was racing toward the future. The hum of subway trains, the roar of taxi engines, the whistle of ferry boats, these were the sounds of a city always on the move, never looking back. New York City has always been a city of change. The New York of the 1950s, with its bustling diners, jazz-filled nights, and sharp-dressed crowds, feels like a world away from the modern metropolis we know today. Back then, the pace was different. No smartphones, no digital billboards lighting up Times Square, and a sense of community that some say has faded over time. But was it really better? Or do we just romanticize the past? Sure, things weren't perfect. Housing struggles, social divides, and the constant push for modernization shaped daily life just as much as they do now. But there was a charm to that era, a feeling that New York was at the center of the world, where dreams felt possible and the future seemed limitless. So what do you think? Would you rather have lived in 1950s New York, sipping coffee at a 5-cent diner and catching a Broadway show for a couple of dollars? Or do you prefer the fast-paced, tech-driven city of today? Let us know in the comments. And if you love these trips down memory lane, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more nostalgic looks at New York's past. We've got plenty more stories to tell. Until next time, keep the nostalgia alive.